And now it is time for the pastor and the preacher's kid. Opinions expressed are those of the show hosts, not WSTU or Treasure Coast broadcasters. Any reproduction or reuse of this program without written consent of WSTU is strictly prohibited. And now, here are your hosts, Pastor Dino, Traven, and Jonathan.
Thank you, Ray, and good to see you, my good friend. And things are going well with you, I understand. And Traven, it's hard to believe we have put in so many programs here recently, and we're kind of winding to the end here.
Yeah, we're coming like I think close to being pro at this. I think. At least you are. I'm still kind of a rookie, but I'm working on it.
A pro is a matter of opinion, probably, right?
Right.
Well, we've had some great programs these last few weeks, Traven. I'm really delighted tonight. We have a guest on, somebody I've known for quite a few years, actually.
Sure.
I am so delighted my son Jonathan is on with us. Jonathan, he and I wrote a book not long ago called Words That Change History, and that's the theme of what we want to talk about this week. But this is my oldest son, Traven. This is my second child in the order of four. He is the smartest. He is the best looking. And what else was he wanted me to say?
That's all correct.
And he used to be a football player, from what I understand, reading the book.
Yeah.
I noticed you played. You had four kids that you played football with the family, but and of course, Dad was always the quarterback, right? Because he had to take control, right? But we had 8 kids in our family, and my mom used to say when I had 2 sisters, and we would play tackle. We should not have been playing tackle, but we did. And my mom used to say, "You're supposed to play football. You're not supposed to kill each other," because we would come in pretty beat up. So I don't know if you guys had that experience, but we would be pretty bloody when we played.
Yeah, we had some pretty epic matches
Yeah.
back in the country hills of Pennsylvania when I was a kid, and thankfully I came out on top of all of them.
Yeah, so see 2 great football states, Ohio and Pennsylvania, and actually tomorrow Ohio State's playing Penn State at home, so that's going to be a really good
And
game.
you in the audience, please, all of you, pray for me. I got an Ohio State next to me and a Penn State next to me, and they are vicious, and they're sitting next to each other. I'm not in the
Good
middle.
stuff. Good stuff. 2 great schools.
Yeah, 2 great schools. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your background, Jonathan. Tell us a little bit about what you do. Tell us a little about your family. We're going to get into the book here in just a few minutes. Talk a little bit about your education. We're delighted that you're on. Really great to have you.
That's great.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here with you guys. I've been an educator for over 20 years now. Love the field of education. Love teaching. I have a wonderful wife, Karen, at home. 3 kids, Mia, William, and Juliet. The reason we wrote this book, I think, is because we're both very interested in the biblical story, the scriptures. I've been reading the Bible almost my entire life, it seems. Obviously, growing up in the home of as a pastor's kid, you get a lot of exposure to the Christian life, to church, to the scriptures. But it wasn't until I got a little bit older in my teenage years and eventually went to get a degree in biblical studies in my undergrad and went to seminary that I really started to read the Bible sort of on my own, study the Bible more intensely. And that process, as I do it more and more as I get older, that process continues. It always surprises me. It always there's always new things to learn. There's always new avenues to explore. So I think that's part of the reason why we wrote the book, just to talk about some of the things we've read in the scriptures, some of what they mean, and some of the challenges that are there.
Yeah, one of the things, Jonathan, that has always been a source of encouragement to me is you and I have had coffee together and chatted about theology. We've had some late night discussions and talked about theology. I've always been impressed with the fact that on your own, you've studied so much of it and you have a handle on it. You bring up some very good questions and good arguments and good statements. And so I think that was another plus, wasn't it, when we did this book together?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sort of was born out of our discussions that we've had. We've had a lot of them about different issues. Sometimes we disagree. I, of course, was always right. For some reason, you just can never understand the truth of that statement. But I think we had a lot of great discussions. We've learned from each other. I know I like to ask a lot of questions. I mean, you've been a pastor for over 50 years, so he's forgotten more about the Bible than I'll ever know. So it's always, always challenging to me to talk to someone who knows so much, to bring up ideas, to ask good questions, and to have those discussions. And I think those are so important today, that we have communities, we have places where we can ask difficult questions, have good discussions, and talk about things that come up as we read the scriptures.
So do you think, Jonathan, that when we have discussions like this, that it's more helpful? Some people get into discussions, and it's like politics, the election, all that. There's big arguments all the time. Is it healthy to have these kind of discussions on theology, and have maybe a Christian approach to it of understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Bible doesn't have a category for Christians who are living by themselves, so to speak. The Bible is formed in community. I think one of the purposes in our churches is that we need to have people that are coming together to read the scriptures, to discuss the scriptures. The community plays such an important role in that, where people go out and read, and they think, and they have questions. And the Bible has a lot of questions. There's a lot of things in the Bible that aren't answered, that leave it open for us. And the community of faithful believers together, getting together regularly to discuss things, to ask hard questions, to disagree. And I think that's okay and also at the end of a conversation to come away and say, you know what, I don't know the answer yet. I'm not sure. The more I study, the less I know. There's so many questions that are open-ended, things that are not explained. And that gives us so much room for expansion and growth when we study the scriptures.
And you have degrees in education and theology, correct?
Yes. I went to seminary, and then I got my terminal degree in education.
Mm-hmm. Traven, I know you've been reading through this book. You've got questions. Yeah. How do you like that big ink spot on the front of the book?
Yeah,
that's not my generation, but that's
pretty
Jonathan's
cool.
generation.
Yeah, I like it.
And
I like it.
Yeah.
Words have meaning, and I think about my training. I was fortunate to hear Zig Ziglar in Columbus, Ohio, actually, and Zig said that words have meaning, and he says, and I'm going to give you a phrase, and he said, I'm going to let you know that there's several ways to say this sentence, and he said, I did not say the man slapped his wife. He said, now, don't take offense. We're just using it as a phrase. And he said, there's a lot of ways you can say that sentence. You could say, I did not say the man slapped his wife, inferring that somebody else said it, not him. I didn't say the man slapped his wife. He scolded her, but he didn't slap her. Okay. So as you take that sentence, there's so many different ways you can take that sentence and use the words. So words do have multiple meanings. So I thought the book was really well done. And I do have some additional questions. I've always taken, learning from my dad's from a Pentecostal standpoint, they would cover the prodigal son. Of course, my brother-in-law, who's Catholic, he goes, if I hear one more sermon on the prodigal son, I'm gonna leave the church. He said, I can't take it anymore. But I always felt bad for for lack of better terminology, the good son, the son that did what he was asked of by his father. Well, I know that the whole story is about, love and forgiveness and those types of things. But you got to think about it from the standpoint of the son who did exactly what his father asked him to do. And it appears that dad either forgot to tell him that, hey, we're having a party tonight, you're invited. But so there's a lot of, as Jonathan said, there's a lot of questions about some of these things in the Bible. It's like, why didn't you just tell your son, hey, we're having a party, we're going to cut this calf up, we're going to have a really big party? But so I always took issue with that, because each of us coming from a big family, some of us tried to do it what I call the right way, tried to do the right things. Others kind of took their own path. And again, it seems like, and I know there's scriptures in the Bible about, if you have 100 sheep and one goes astray, will not a shepherd go for the one to try to capture it? And I know there's different meanings for that, but also too is you do have to look over the 99, the flock of 99, because they're still here. So, but that's something I think I would like to have a discussion with you guys, maybe offline, because there's just so much there. And
that's a really good question.
Then the other thing that really hit me is, in talking about the rocks, we used to throw rocks too, Jonathan, so don't feel bad. And we finally resorted to corn from the fields instead of rocks, because we found out they did less damage. But I love on page 33 is that you're talking about the fruit. You'll know them by their fruit, right? And it talks about Christ and really being more Christ-like. And this book is really great. Anybody who has this book, or you don't have, you maybe consider buying it. But on page 73, I think it really gives us a way we're supposed to live. And I was like, it was really powerful to me that going through that. I was like, wow, that's pretty insightful. So but really good material. And Jonathan sounds like a lot of us when we were kids and throwing rocks and those kinds of things and getting in trouble. So, but I'll tell you some of my stories sometimes offline, of course. So sorry to go on and on, but
that Dave did not do well with his mother, by the way.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had led my younger brother Adam and I down to the end of our dirt road, and for some reason that day we thought it would be a good idea out to pick up rocks and throw rocks at the cars that were going by. I think I was 5, and my brother would have been 3.5 at the time. And the only way my mom found out was one of the people that was driving past that we had hit their car with a rock, stopped, got out of the car, took us all the way down the dirt road back to our house, knocked on the door with us there with him, and told my mom, "Are you aware that your sons are out throwing rocks at cars that drive by?" Not the best decision I've ever made. Not the best day of my life after that either. Not something that I think I would do again.
You know, thinking when us preachers' kids, everybody's like, "Oh, the preachers' kids, they're really perfect." And I'm reminded this time of year, Halloween, we got to. I grew up in a really small community, about 100 people, and us kids got together one night. And we decided we're going to go down and used to call tic-tacking windows, right? So we'd take corn, right, field corn, and we'd throw it at somebody's window. Well, one of the kids got the bright idea. He was going to pick up some gravel from the highway. So we said, on the count of 3, everybody throw it. Well, we didn't know he had rocks in his hand, broke the gentleman's window. And of course, we all ran back home and ran to our bedrooms real quick. And I remember seeing the sheriff car going up and down the road, looking for us villains. But he never caught us at least on that trip, he didn't.
And you have a chapter on that in here with about a rock, right?
Yeah. There's a chapter in the book called Rock, and it tells the story of me throwing rocks. I can also remember as a kid, I think I broke at least 3 windows in the house because I was practicing baseball, and I didn't want to.
You never told me that.
I wanted to have something to throw the ball against. I think I blamed it on one of my other siblings after it happened. But yeah, we have a chapter in the book about the story of rock, and it centers on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, Matthew 5-7. And I think the Sermon on the Mount is probably, if you want to know what the message of Jesus is, if we wanted to boil down his message and say, what's one sermon you should read? Matthew 5-7 is probably that sermon. Right. Jesus lays out in sort of an upside down sermon in some ways. He starts off with the Beatitudes, and he says, the people that are blessed are the people that are meek, the powerless, the people that are willing to give up things for others, the people that mourn are the ones that are blessed, which is completely upside down. That's the opposite of what we want in today's society. We think the more power I can get, the more we'll be able to do, the higher position I can get. And Jesus starts with that. He ends the story in Matthew 5-7 with a familiar story. Talks about 2 builders, one who builds their foundation or their house on a rock. As a kid, I always thought that just referred to, you build a house on a solid foundation. And I thought, well, that, maybe this is part of, the precursor to HGTV. But what Jesus was saying there is he's referring to the rock is where the Temple Mount was, which was the center of religious life in Judaism, still a sacred site today. And what he's saying is in Matthew 5-7, the people that act in this way, that do these things, they will be people of the rock. They will be the true representatives of the temple people. The way that for the Jewish nation, the people that do these things, he says, they are the true Jews. They are the ones that are really fulfilling what God wants them to be. Yeah. And so that's where kind of the idea of rock and the story of me throwing rocks at cars that went by sort of came from.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite chapters. I was like, that's a cool story. I mean, it's really the way you brought it out was fantastic. I can tell he's Italian because he's got the hands going, like, so.
One of the chapters that I think is fascinating to a lot of the readers here is the one at Midrash.
Yeah.
And I want to read a statement that you make here. It says on page 49, the rabbis puzzled over, debated, and cherished each word. They filled in gaps with magnificent stories that shed light on what God intended us to do or to learn. What is midrash? Tell us a little bit about that.
Midrash is a word that means to search out. So in the scripture, there's a lot of questions that don't get answered. There's a lot of gaps. So in the chapter I mentioned early on in Genesis, Cain marries a wife. Where does his wife come from? Well, the passage doesn't tell us. The scripture doesn't tell us. It leaves it open. But what the rabbis would do is the rabbis would have teachings about the scriptures. And when you would follow after a rabbi, you would take on their teachings, their yoke, right? And rabbis would sit around and talk, and they would debate scriptures. They would fill in gaps. The scriptures oftentimes don't give us simple, direct answers. Sometimes they leave things open. And people have recognized this from ancient times. Some people oftentimes say, you ask them what they think about the Bible or the scriptures. They'll say, the Bible says it. I believe it. That settles it. And that sounds good. That sounds like something we like. But anytime the Bible says anything, we have to think about it. We have to interpret it. We have to think through it critically. And that's something that the rabbis have done for thousands of years. They fill in the gaps. They draw out lessons from these passages that Jesus answers he asks a lot of questions in the Gospels. He answers very few of them. He leaves a lot of questions open-ended. And I think part of that is it's our job as faithful people, as people of the book going forward, to read those passages and say, okay, how am I supposed to live this out now in my life? What do I need to do going forward?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, I think, in one of the chapters that Christ asked over 400 questions, but only answered 3, something to that. It's pretty bizarre, the differential, pretty bizarre.
Yeah, he asks a lot of questions and he doesn't answer them, which in some ways could seem very frustrating because you would say, well, just tell me the answer.
Yeah.
And I think part of faith is this aspect of not going to tell you the answer, but we want you to struggle with this, to wrestle with this. If the Bible was just simply a book of questions and answers, we could learn those fairly quickly.
But by doing the wrestling, that's a form of learning. You have to kind of struggle with it and ask those questions. And I've always told my kids, it's like, don't believe me, seek the truth. God wants you to ask questions. He wants you to inquire, because once you do that, you will find the truth. If you seek it, you'll find it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also important, from my perspective, growing up as a pastor's kid, that everyone that grows up in church at some point is going to have to go out and find their faith on their own. It's easy to have a faith that's given to you by your pastor, by your parents, by your church. But as you grow, you've got to find that faith and work that out on your own. And sometimes that's a very difficult process as you begin to question things that were sort of ingrained into your head from a very early age. But that process of finding your own faith is what helps you have a vibrant faith, a growing faith. And it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to think differently. Those things are all part of the process.
I've wondered sometimes the Pharisees, the Jewish scholars, Jesus was a pretty young man when he was basically in temple and learning the Torah and the interpretation, listening to the Midrash. But it sounds like he was a really great student because he learned a great deal pretty quickly. He reminds me like our young gentleman now is Ben Shapiro. I see this guy go toe to toe with people that are scholars, and he's very well read and at least knows the Jewish faith pretty well. But Jesus must have been that kind of really, we know he's great, special, he's our savior, but he was really a great student also.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I imagine that he would ask really good questions.
Yeah.
He would be that student that, as a teacher, you have that student in class that asks questions that dig below the surface.
Yes.
And I sometimes have students that will ask questions, and my first thought is, I don't know the answer, or I haven't thought about it in this way. And those are the students that are really grasping what we're doing. They're asking the hard questions, and they make me go back and rethink, okay, I said this, I think this. What is that based on?
Yeah, and I will often think about too, that's probably why he wasn't, some folks didn't really like him, because can you think about some of these scholars who were 60, 70, 80 years old, and they're like, who's this kid to be asking me this question, right? Yeah. So think about that dynamic has got to be pretty interesting back then.
I got to ask you this question though, Jonathan. this discussion on midrash, that's good. That's really deep. But you got one in here called spit. What in the world is that about? I mean, how do you get from midrash to spit?
So spit is one of the chapters. Each of the chapters in the book is centered around a single word, something we wanted to draw out, something that we wanted to make sort of interesting. Spit is about a story where Jesus heals a guy by spitting on the ground and sort of making mud and putting it on his eyes. The story is very, very interesting. There's almost like a two-stage sort of healing in this story. There's a progression. The question that I asked was, why would Jesus spit on the ground? And why would he put mud in somebody's eyes? Because to me, spitting is like one of the most gross things that could happen. If I was blind and I went to Jesus and I said, I'd like to be healed, and he said, I'm going to spit on you, I would probably think about that twice and think, how badly do I really want to be healed here? Do I really want someone to spit on me?
Right.
Yeah, so the chapters have a variety of things like that, and I want to thank you for writing the book with me, Jonathan. It was kind of a blessing us doing that together, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a great experience. I mean, one of the things that I know you've written dozens of books. I wanted to eventually at some point write a book with you just to have that experience. It was a great process. As we both sat, we thought about different stories. We were able to share different parts of the Gospels, the message of Jesus, where it challenged us. We sort of started with stories. We boiled them down to words, and I think in each chapter we try to ask questions and go a little bit deeper and say, what does this mean? Maybe there's something else behind this. Maybe there's something else that we can dig a little bit deeper into, and hopefully throughout the book we challenge people to read the scriptures more carefully and to pick them up and read them again and look for new meaning, new words, new understandings.
The book that Philip Yancey wrote, and you're familiar, of course, with Philip Yancey, a very avid writer, The Jesus I Never Knew. He once said 2 words one could never think of applying to the Jews of the Gospels: boring and predictable. And that's pretty much the way it is with Christ, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you can read the Gospels and come away thinking that Jesus is either boring, predictable, or average. Even people that don't think of him as divine or the Messiah or anything like that, I think his teachings are challenging. I think they're subversive. He does a lot of things in his teachings that challenge the ruling parties of the day. Jesus gets involved in political disputes, and he has really wise words, and he has ways of disarming people that are so powerful that they've been used for centuries. His examples have been used for centuries by people to bring about real significant change in society.
And Ray, I'm going to give this phone number out. Do you think I can do that right? What do you think? 220 WSTU. Is that right?
Oh, that is for the third time. Yeah, 220-9788 or 220-WSTU.
And if you want to call in and ask Jonathan or one of us a question, please do that. We'd love to hear from you. And we're talking about the words that change history. This book was published by Westbow Press, which is a division of both Thomas Nelson and Zondervan. And they did a really good job with this, I think, Jonathan. As you go through this, they did a great job in putting this book together for us. And these chapters that are here are also very, very helpful in understanding issues about what Jesus said. So what is your favorite chapter that you wrote on here? Is there one like that, Jonathan?
Boy, there's several. As I go back and think about the book, there were several that were a lot of fun to write. I loved writing about your father, my grandfather, in the first chapter of the book. I really enjoyed, wrote a chapter about our famous football sessions, not about our football sessions, but it starts off with our football sessions in the yard. And I think probably the most significant chapter is probably the last chapter that we both kind of co-wrote on the resurrection. I think if there's any chapter or any sort of message from the Gospels that matter the most, I think that's the one that's number one.
Yeah, the resurrection is, you mentioned it, the word you use is the linchpin of the Christian faith, and it really is, and it's such a a delightful thought that Jesus Christ has risen from the grave, and we too shall rise one day. And so we've done that. So we're going to be taking a break here in just a moment, and Alex is on the line, and Alex will be with you in just a few moments. And so we're taking our break right now.
And we'll be back with the pastor and the preacher's kid in just a moment. And now we return to the pastor and the preacher's kid with Pastor Dino Traven and Pastor Dino's son, Jonathan.
Thank you, Ray. We have two callers on the line. We'll take the first one. Al, welcome to the program. We're delighted you called in. Now, how are you, sir, and what's your question?
I have one question for Jonathan and then two comments that don't need response. My question for Jonathan is, where do you live now and what are you doing? I missed it.
Yeah, I live in Sunrise, Florida, so I'm down here in South Florida, and I'm a teacher. I've been in education for over 20 years. I teach high schoolers, and I teach some college courses as well locally here in South Florida at Lynn University, Broward College, and a couple other universities online. I'm a dissertation advisor for a seminary in California. And my full-time job, my regular job, is teaching at American Heritage School down in Plantation, Florida.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And then I have a comment for your dad and for Traven. For your dad, this is the first time I've heard the program, and I'm very, very impressed. And for Traven, I hope you get a good short night's sleep tonight before your big trip.
Thank you. Hey, thank you, Al. You know what's going on, don't you, Al?
Yeah.
What's taking
I do.
place? Yeah, maybe
Thank you.
just say a word about that, Traven, because that is such a special thing.
Tonight, I'm going to be getting up quite early. We're taking one of a good friend of mine and one of our parishioners. He served in Vietnam back in 1968. And I'm taking him to tomorrow on what's called the honor flight. So we'll be getting up quite early and heading to West Palm Beach International, catch on a flight. And I think we land in DC around 8:30 or 9. And they got a whole day planned for us, really to honor all the veterans. We've got a couple gentlemen that are, I think, World War II, several folks from Korea, the Korean War, and the majority, I think, are Vietnam vets. But we just want to honor these people. So if you have nothing going tomorrow evening, you want to come down and have a really great way to contribute to these people, come to West Palm Beach International Airport and just wait for the veterans to come in. It's usually packed, and it will be quite an experience for you. But just great people.
And Al, thank you for mentioning that, by the way. I think that's a great honor for these veterans, and I appreciate, Traven, so much that you're doing with that as well. Thank you so much. We have another caller here as well. Alex, if you're on the line, we'd be glad to talk to you, and thank you, sir, for calling in. Alex, can you hear us? Alex, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you
Hi,
hear me?
Alex. Yes, we can. So glad you called in. What's your question, Alex?
Well, my question is, we'll talk about words that changed history. And the first thing I came up with was our Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, that's a great document. Jonathan, you want to say a word about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Declaration of Independence over 250 years ago, America signing that, laying out the idea early on in the Declaration of Independence, in the words of Jefferson, um, that all people have dignity, all people have certain inalienable rights that are given to them simply because they're created by God. I think that message is incredibly important today, where it's easy for us to look at people who are different from us and think they're less, or because they're different, that God doesn't love them as much. But I think that the message early on in the Declaration that people have inalienable rights simply because everybody is made in the image of God is definitely a relevant message.
And you teach that at the school, right? That whole era of American history.
Yes, I do. I like to delve into the realm of things you're not supposed to talk about. So I teach about religion and I teach politics. So I'm a lot of fun at dinner parties.
Alex, you hit the nail on the head with that phone call. We have another caller on the line, and Rob is on. He's going to be coming on here for just a moment with us. And I think that you're getting all the material ready too over there for our advertisers. You're going to tell us about in just a minute, Trey.
Yeah.
Rob, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for calling in. What's your question, sir?
Well, it's kind of a comment / question, and it's something I've thought of for a while, and I need you scholars to maybe sort this out. One of the things that I've always thought, I know that we break the Bible into the Old Testament and the New Testament, and I know that's demarcated by, the coming of Jesus. And I just think it would sometimes serve maybe humanity better if there wasn't a demarcation of old and new. A lot of Christians, they have the New Testament, but the Jews kind of have the old, even though we study both. But it's almost like it's too bad they don't, the whole story of redemption doesn't flow together, a little bit better. So I just don't know why they maybe made an old and a new. Follow me?
Yeah, Jonathan, you want to address that?
Yeah, that's definitely sort of problematic, especially referring to them as the old and the new. For some people, they look at it, the old is old, outdated, irrelevant, not needed. And the new is what we really focus on. It also sort of creates a division where we don't really understand the history of Israel or the Jewish nature of the scriptures. I oftentimes, when I'm speaking in classes, I try to refer to them as the Hebrew scriptures, and sometimes the Christian Testament. I know some people refer to them as the New Testament as the Newer Testament as well, just to sort of demarcate that and sort of make sure that people understand that both of them go together, that both of them are equally important. Throughout the book that we wrote, we make a lot of references to the Hebrew scriptures, because for Jesus, that was the scriptures that he read. When he's teaching about the Hebrew scriptures. So to sort of cut that off is like, sort of cutting off half of it, the story doesn't make sense without that. You need both of them together, and you need a good understanding of both. Both are excellent to read, and the Old Testament especially has so many stories that are challenging and difficult and questions to ask. It's not reading that and not making that part of your daily life. You really do miss out on a lot if you do that.
That's a great question,
Yes.
Rob, and a great answer, John.
I
Go ahead, Rob.
I happen to have a Bible that at the beginning, it's like a learning Bible. Beginning, even in the Old Testament, it'll say finding Jesus in this chapter. So you can get, when you read it just straight, you don't necessarily see the connection with Jesus, but once it's explained, you see the connection.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
great stuff. Hey,
thank
Rob,
you.
that's a great question. I really appreciate that question. It's really well thought out. And thank you for the good answer, Jonathan.
Right.
Traven, we got some advertising to do
We-
over there. We
we
got some
do.
precious friends. Tell them
Well,
about the church as well and
yeah.
services all.
Well, the church, again, we'd love to have you come on Sundays at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. We're at 3110 Astor Lane here in Stewart, beautiful Stewart.
Hey,
So
Traven,
come see
Sunday
us.
morning, I want to say this. Next 2 Sundays, I'm speaking on anxiety.
Oh, nice.
Think of
That'd be-
the election. Anxiety.
Yeah. Good fit, right? Yeah, really good fit. Hey, a couple other things at the church on November 17th, 5 p.m. Willem on piano, a special holiday program. That's a free program. So if you can make it, that'd be fantastic. We have another program coming up December 7th, 3 p.m. We're going to have the Treasure Coast Community Singers and Youth Choir. Again, seasonal melodies from stage and screen. Tickets on sale at tccsingers.org. Again, tccsingers.org. That's a mouthful, but come and be with us if you can. That'd be great. A couple want to acknowledge our sponsors. Pools by Greg. They've been building custom pools here for over 40 years. They can be reached at 772-337-9713. Again, Pools by Greg, 772-337-9713. I want to get a couple other folks in here real quick if we could. We have Paul Piatti, Home Improvements. Paul, too, has been in the area here for over 40 years. He can be reached at 772-546-3403. Again, 772-546-3403. Paul's terrific. Also, Two Anchors Plumbing. If you're looking for a gentleman that knows what they're doing, you can call Two Anchors Plumbing and give Larry Grubb a call. His direct line, 772-201-3516, or his partner, Tom McGinn. Tom can be reached at 772-210-2084. So again, give them a call. And also I wanted to thank our wonderful pastor. He was one of our sponsors. So thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Traven.
And also just want to, my firm also is one of our sponsors, and we can be reached. Sexton Financial Group can be reached at 772-223-4000. Again, 772-223-4000. So thanks for giving me that time, guys.
Yeah. Jonathan, there's two things. We don't have time in this segment to cover both of them. I want you to just begin getting into this a little bit on the subject of the legacy with your grandfather, but also we want to at the end of this program spend some time on the resurrection. You mentioned how important that was when we kind of wrote that thing together, and it really is an emotional and very life-changing thing. So just maybe a word here about the legacy with your grandfather that you never met on Earth.
Yeah, the first chapter of the book is called Legend, and it's actually the first chapter of the book that I wrote. And it centers around my grandfather. My grandfather sort of lives in lore in the family as sort of this legendary figure, larger than life. When I picture my grandfather, he's 8 feet tall. He can, straddle mountains. He's sort of like a Paul Bunyan. I have this sort of outsized sort of view of him. And one of the connections I still have to my grandfather is a baseball bat that we actually found. I remember the day we found it. After my grandmother had passed away, we were cleaning out a closet underneath the stairs. In the very bottom of that closet, all the way at the end, there was a bat. Pulled it out. Lo and behold, that bat was signed by Babe Ruth. And so, and the other thing that we found in there was I still have framed on my wall. I've got the bat in a nice frame. I've also got the original telegram from the early 1900s that was sent to him that says, you won a contest, you've won a bat signed by Babe Ruth, and it tells him where to come and pick it up. And so I sort of jump off of that, and we talk about sort of the legendary stories of the Hebrew scriptures. And one of those people is David. David is sort of a larger than life figure in the Hebrew scriptures. And Jewish kids and Jesus would have grown up hearing stories about David, much like I hear stories about my grandfather, larger than life, just a hero in sort of so many ways.
Yeah, and the other one, of course, is about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and that's a very powerful one. When I remember Jonathan as a youngster, a teenager, I began to wonder: is our faith really the right faith, or is this just a lot of religions? This happens to be our religion. And I think the thing that changed me completely was this whole idea of the resurrection, understanding that Jesus Christ had literally raised from the grave. One preacher once put it this way. He said, if you went to this huge, long place where there were religions all the way across, and you looked at every leader's dead, but one's alive, I knew who I'm going to go after, the one that's alive. And I think that was a tremendous chapter, and I want you to get to that in just a moment. Also, we're glad Nyla is on the line, and she's going to be talking to us as soon as we get done with the break here. And I want to say this also about the resurrection, Jonathan. Your granddad that you talk about here, he's gone on to be with the Lord, absent from the bodies, present with the Lord. But at the resurrection, we will see him. You'll get to know him. He wasn't 8 feet tall, but you'll get to know him. but he was a wonderful father and just a wonderful grandfather, somebody that our entire family speaks highly about, just like you, our father. In fact, he was being my father when I was a youngster. I didn't need heroes. He was the hero, and that meant a lot to me.
Yeah, we need more of that.
Yeah, we do, Traven. Time for a break, my friends.
Yeah, it's funny.
And we'll take a break and come back in 2 minutes to the pastor and the preacher's kid. And now we return to the pastor and the preacher's kid with Pastor Dino, Traven, and Jonathan. Gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Ray. And Traven, we are coming to an end of this broadcast. Next week, I think we're going to do the program on the Bible again that we did. And there was a lot of response on that. Yeah. Then the week after that, one is on anxiety and depression. Yes. We have a guest professional coming in for that. Yes. And then it's the last one you and I are going to do together.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's going by quickly. It really is.
I'll sing and you can dance. How's that?
Well, my dancing is better than my singing, and my singing is bad. So,
my dad, I have to tell you this real quick. My father, when he was a young man, back in the day, he used to dance and he would win pies because the ladies in the community would make pies, and he would win them. And then I said, Dad, did you eat the pies? He said, no, I gave them to all the other ladies that I was interested in because he didn't have any money. So he literally would get on a soapbox and dance. And then that's how he would communicate with the ladies of the community.
Very talented guy.
Isn't that funny?
It is.
Yeah, good stuff.
Nyla, we're so glad you're on the line. Thank you so much for waiting. God bless you. What is your question?
Okay, I have a question for Jonathan because I think he took a big part in the book on this chapter. And I'm not too sure why he would have chosen the word fit. If I saw that as the title, I probably would not have read that chapter, but I understand the story.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that?
That chapter, it focuses around the story of Jesus sort of making mud with saliva. I tell the story. I'm a huge sports fan. And I remember a story that I tell it in the book about a football game where I remember Bill Romanowski, who is famous in football for being super tough, super competitive, sort of I don't know if you would call him a dirty player, but I remember watching the game and he spit into the face of a 49ers wide receiver named J.J. Stokes. And I've watched, probably hundreds of football games, but I remember that game. I can see it in my mind today when he did that, because spitting is so powerful. It's so like visceral. It's like and when I read that story in the Gospels, I remember it. Like it has sort of this reaction to me of just, man, this is something someone does to make something very, very memorable.
For sure.
Yeah, any other kind of action I think you might forget, but if you spit on someone, that is such a sign of disrespect, or it's gross.
Disgrace.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful. I would, if someone asked me, would you rather have someone hit you or spit on you? I think I would rather have somebody hit me, and that's how powerful it is.
Yeah, okay, I understand. I just thought, wow, what a word to use. Okay, thank you for your explanation. That goes a little deeper, knowing that you did experience seeing it happen, and also knowing that it is Jesus that's being the one who's using his fiddle. Thank you.
Yeah, it is pretty disgusting. 3 or 4 weeks ago, when Ohio State played Oregon, the Ohio State player, the defender, was trying to guard the receiver in Oregon, and the Oregon player spit on him. And I can't think of anything more disgusting, than that. And if I were the coach, not only would he have been out of the game, he'd probably been out of several games, because that is not great behavior. So.
We when we think of all of these chapters in here, Jonathan, and that whole one on spit, I think that's one that does jump out at us a lot of times. What in the world is that about? But some of the chapters are legend, birthday, exile, coal, father, exchange, water, light, shoes, children, 4 out and up, football story, image, tyrant, Judas, left behind, tetelestai, messy, arrival, GPS, napkin. But we kind of finished the book with the story of the resurrection. I'm going to give a quote here from C.S. Lewis. I'm going to ask you the question about what the resurrection means to you. C.S. Lewis, perhaps the most quoted person in this generation, Bible scholar from Cambridge, once said, Jesus has forced open a door that has been locked since the death of the first man. He has met, fought, and beaten the king of death. Everything is different because he has done so. This is the beginning of the new creation. A new chapter in cosmic history has opened. That's taken from C.S. Lewis's book, Miracles, published by Collins out of London. Great statement, isn't it? Tell us about the resurrection.
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out to me about the resurrection, at home, I have quite a large book on the resurrection. And sometimes when people see like really large books, they'll ask if I've read it, and then they'll ask me what the book is about. And when people ask me about that book, I say, well, yes, I have read it. I plowed my way all the way through it. It took me quite a while, but the resurrection is the linchpin of all history, I think. It's the linchpin of the story. The other thing I tell people is resurrection is physical. We start off that chapter as well by giving a quote from the Roman Emperor Vespasian when he says, oh dear, I think I am becoming a god. And he says that on his deathbed because when Roman emperors would die, oftentimes those who came after him would say that his spirit ascended into the heavens. He sort of floated off into the heavens and became a god. And then the emperor that, of course, comes after them would then become the son of someone who has become a god. That happens with Julius Caesar. His adopted son Augustus takes on that title. But that is different than what happens to Jesus. Jesus is not said to have floated off into the sky. His spirit doesn't just sort of disappear and live on. Resurrection means literally getting up out of the tomb and walking around. And that is such a powerful statement that's different from what we see in the ancient world where people are said to have ascended off and gone on to a purely spiritual existence. Jesus physically gets out of the grave. And when Jesus does that, he defeats death, he defeats sin, he defeats the powers of this world. And it's a picture that one day God's going to restore all things. He's going to his good creation that he created at the very beginning in Genesis 1 has gone awry, but God is going to fix all of that. He's going to restore all that. And resurrection is the clearest picture of that, of where it's not things will be lost or things will come back in our minds or in some sort of spiritual ephemeral way. It's literally God's going to make all things right. Just like Jesus gets up out of the grave and walks around, one day he's going to restore all things.
Yeah. And, Jonathan, I was thinking here a few weeks ago, you and I and all of our family went back to Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. We had a great anniversary, the 50th anniversary of the Cumberland Valley Christian School, a school I started 50 years ago. It was quite an event for me to be still around after starting that school that many years ago. But I remember all of us went out to the graveside where my father's buried and my mother's buried. And the fact is, one day they'll get up and walk around, won't they? It'll be the same kind of idea, the same kind of concept. And so the resurrection is such a beautiful term. At the end of the book, it says the Old Testament refers to heaven over 300 times and again over 250 times in the New Testament. The Greek word in the New Testament that is commonly used is Uranus, meaning God's dwelling place. My parents, because of their faith in Jesus Christ, are now with Jesus. One day I will see them again at the resurrection. We have new bodies. The resurrection refers to a new world, a new earth, and a new blessing. Traven, that I know rings true in your heart too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it reminds me of the song, "We'll have a new body and we'll have a new life." I can't remember all the words to it, but I know there was an old gospel tune that encompassed those words to it. So that's pretty strong.
Yeah, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is, Jonathan has said and put it so well, it is the linchpin of the Christian faith. Well, Jonathan, it's been great having you on, and people may want to get this book. You can go online and get this book and just simply put in the words that change history and find places you can get it at. And but we're not here really just to sell the book. We're here to talk about the truth of this book. And so maybe in just a moment, Jonathan, could you kind of give us your overall feeling and sense of satisfaction having written the book, which has such content that I think is truly life-changing?
Yeah, it was a wonderful privilege to write this book with you. I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed sort of looking into some familiar stories, which is what we try to do. We try to take some stories that people are familiar with the Bible. Maybe you've been in church, you've probably heard these stories before, but we try to tell them with a little more depth, or maybe in a little bit deeper way, take you behind the scenes a little bit to some of the history behind some of the statements in the Bible. Sometimes we just gloss over because we've read them so many times, and we miss the deeper meaning in the story. Stories like when Jesus spits on the ground, stories like the prodigal son. In the chapter about the prodigal son, the story starts out, a certain man had two sons. And that's something that's easy to sort of skip by really quickly and just say, well, that's just sort of a background. He had two sons. But that has such a deeper connection to the Hebrew scriptures, because that statement would have gotten the hearers of that story to think, wait, where have I heard this before? And so those are some of the things we try to do that continually throughout the book to challenge us to read these stories in new ways.
Yeah. Traven, we're almost done with this program. The time is flying by, and this has been a great hour, hasn't it?
Yes, been really good. I bet as you guys were writing this book, you had a lot of aha moments like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, I
Yeah.
learned a great deal going through this.
I learned a lot from my son going through this. It was
Yeah,
wonderful.
great.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And these chapters, Traven, I think are unique to themselves because of the way that they've been written, with the style they've been written, about simple words and yet great words. So next week we'll be talking again about this whole idea of the Bible, and then one on anxiety. Then we're closing off pretty soon,
Yeah.
Traven. It's been great.
It's going to be great.
Yeah, you've
Yeah,
been
it's been
great.
great.
And Jonathan, thank you.
Thanks,
thank
Jonathan,
you. Thank you for being on.
And thanks, Ray.
Yeah, Ray, you're the best. You do a great job back there. Thank
Well,
you so
thank
much,
you.
sir.
Thank you, gentlemen.